Silence was Ayo and Amara Moyo's shield at Eastville High, where their African heritage made them instant targets. Jungle kids, Connor Rourke called them, orchestrating daily torments while his followers recorded every humiliation. They collected, each insult quietly, the monkey sounds, the banana peels, the stage confrontations, storing them away like fuel. No one bothered asking why the twins never reacted, why their posture remained perfect under pressure, or why their movements flowed with unusual grace. No one connected their composed expressions with discipline forged through years of martial arts training. So when Connor cornered them that final day, the crowded hallway fell silent in anticipation of their breaking point. What they witnessed, instead, was the moment two master fighters finally decided that silence had served its purpose, and a small town's darkest secrets began unraveling with a single perfect block. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Eastville's main street as a weathered Greyhound bus pulled up to the curb. Its brakes squealed in protest, doors hissing open to reveal three figures standing in the stairwell. 17-year-old twins, Ayo and Amara, stepped down onto the sidewalk, followed by their mother, Mama Moyo. The small town of Eastville had never seen anyone quite like them before. "Remember what your father taught you," Mama Moyo whispered, her accent thick but her words clear. "New places bring new challenges." Ayo nodded silently, adjusting the strap of his backpack. His sister Amara stood tall beside him, her chin lifted, slightly higher as she noticed the stares from locals across the street. Their matching dark skin seemed to absorb the morning sunlight, making them glow against the faded backdrop of the small town. "Those new kids from Africa," a woman whispered. To her friend as they passed by the town's only diner, she didn't bother lowering her voice. "Wonder what brings them all the way to Eastville." Mama Moyo squeezed both her children's shoulders. "Head up," she reminded them. "Walk proud." The twins had faced transitions before, but somehow, this one felt different. There was something in the air here, a tension, a resistance they could almost taste. Their matching expressions revealed nothing as they collected their luggage and began the walk toward their new home. The next morning arrived too quickly. Eastville High School stood like a fortress against the morning sky, 3 stories of weathered brick and narrow windows that seemed to watch the twins approach. Students clustered in tight groups across the front lawn, conversations halting as Ayo and Amara walked past. "Fresh meat," someone muttered. "What kind of names are those?" "Anyway," another voice added, deliberately loud. Inside, the hallway felt endless. Lockers slammed. Laughter echoed. Eyes followed their every move. "You the transfer students?" A heavy-set secretary looked up from her computer, barely making eye contact. "I-O and Am-Er-Ah." She butchered their names without apology. "It's Ayo and Amara," Amara corrected politely, the cadence of her voice musical despite the tension in her shoulders. The secretary pushed their schedules across the desk. "Whatever. First bell's in 5 minutes." Their first class was biology with Mr. Wilson, a thin man with perpetually fogged glasses and a monotone voice. He paused while taking attendance, staring at their names as though they were written in hieroglyphics. "Ayo Moyo," he called out, squinting at his roster. "Ayo Moyo," Ayo corrected quietly. "Present." The teacher simply grunted and continued. "Am-Er-Ah Moyo." "It's Amara," she said firmly. "Amara." A few students snickered. A blonde girl in the front row rolled her eyes dramatically. "Well, Miss Amara, we don't stand on ceremony with pronunciation here," Mr. Wilson said dismissively. "This is America. You'll get used to it." More laughter rippled through the classroom. Amara's fingers tightened around her pencil, but her expression remained neutral. Beneath the desk, Ayo gently tapped her foot with his, a silent signal. They'd developed years ago, not now, not here. By lunchtime, word had spread through Eastville High about the weird African twins. The cafeteria fell into a hush as they entered, then erupted into pointed whispers. Ayo and Amara found a table in the corner, unpacking containers of home-cooked food Mama Moyo had prepared. Fufu with vegetable stew, the familiar smells bringing a moment of comfort. "What is that?" a girl at the next table asked loudly, wrinkling her nose. "It looks like mashed Play-Doh." Her friend made an exaggerated gagging sound. "Probably some jungle food." A tall boy with carefully styled dark hair pulled out his phone, snapping pictures. "This is definitely going on my story," he laughed. Caption: Wildlife Cafeteria. Amara stared straight ahead, methodically eating her lunch. Ayo did the same, though his eyes scanned the room, cataloging faces, noting exits, assessing potential threats, a habit their father had instilled in them long ago. The tall boy who'd taken the pictures suddenly stood, walking toward their table with exaggerated swagger. His Letterman jacket identified him as someone of importance in this school's hierarchy. A pretty blonde girl followed closely behind him, her expression a perfect mask of disdain. "Hey, new kids," the boy called, out, stopping directly in front of their table. His friend circle watched eagerly. "I'm Connor. This is Jessa. We run things around here." Neither twin responded, continuing to eat. Connor's smile tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a banana peel, tossing it casually onto the floor in front of them. "Oops, dropped something for the jungle kids." Jessa laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Love your outfits," she said, eyeing their clothes. "Do they sell those at the zoo gift shop?" The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Someone from another table made monkey noises. Amara's knuckles whitened around her fork. A pulse throbbed in her temple. Ayo noticed immediately, reaching under the table to touch her wrist gently. "Not yet," he whispered in their native language, his voice barely audible. Amara took a deep breath, released her death grip on the fork, and smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for the welcome," she said evenly. Her accent deliberately thickened. "Very illuminating." Connor's brow furrowed, clearly confused by the lack of reaction. Before he could respond, the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Later that afternoon, Amara found herself in the library, searching fruitlessly for a reference book for her history assignment. The school's collection seemed woefully inadequate. "To try the second shelf from the bottom," a quiet voice suggested from behind her. Amara turned to find a pale girl with copper-colored hair and nervous eyes watching her. The girl seemed to shrink, back as soon as Amara's attention fell on her. "World History Encyclopedia," the girl continued, her words punctuated by a slight stutter. "I used it last semester, it's pretty good." "Thank you," Amara said, crouching down to find the book. "I'm Amara." "I know," the girl replied quickly, then blushed. "I mean, everyone's talking. I'm Lena Miller." There was something different about Lena, a genuine quality that had been notably absent in their other interactions that day. She didn't stare or snicker. Instead, she seemed to be looking at Amara with something approaching recognition, as though she sensed a kindred spirit. "First day," Amara said with a small shrug. "Not going well," Lena nodded, understanding flooding her features. "This town, it doesn't do well with different." She twisted a strand of hair nervously around her finger. "But there's something about you. You're strong. I can tell." Before Amara could respond, Lena had disappeared between the stacks, leaving Amara holding the history book and wondering if she'd just found an ally in this strange, hostile place. Meanwhile, Ayo wandered the empty hallways during his free period, memorizing the layout of the school. A partially torn poster caught his eye, a silhouette in a fighting stance with the words, "After Hours," visible beneath the tear. He pulled out his phone and snapped a quick photo, something about the image, nagging at his instincts. That evening, Mama Moyo sat with her children at their small kitchen table in the rental house, listening to their accounts of the day. Her face remained calm, but her eyes flashed with a mother's protective fire. "The principal called today," she informed them. "Apparently you were unresponsive and dismissive to other students who were trying to welcome you." Amara made a sound of disbelief. "Welcome us? They called us jungle kids." Mama Moyo nodded solemnly. I know what they really did. I told the principal exactly what I thought of his school's hospitality. She reached into a wrapped bundle beside her chair and pulled out a beautiful ornate talking drum. Your grandfather sent this. It arrived today. The twins' eyes widened. The drum was a sacred item from their homeland, carved with symbols of their family lineage. Words can fight louder than fists, Mama Moyo said, placing the drum on the table. Between them, remember what your father taught you about choosing your battles. Later that night, when the house was dark and quiet, Ayo and Amara moved silently through their shared bedroom, pushing furniture against the walls to clear a space in the center. They stood facing each other, bare feet planted firmly on the hardwood floor. Without a word, they tied blindfolds over their eyes. What followed was a display of martial arts mastery that would have stunned anyone fortunate enough to witness it. Their movements were fluid, precise, and perfectly synchronized. Each block, strike, and kick executed with technical perfection. They moved as mirror images, neither making a sound beyond the controlled rhythm of their breathing. These weren't the awkward, uncertain teenagers who had endured humiliation in the cafeteria hours earlier. These were disciplined fighters with years of intensive training, warriors disguised as ordinary students. When they finally removed their blindfolds, sweat glistening on their brows, they shared a look of silent understanding. Patience, strategy, timing. The lessons of their father, Baba Olin, echoed in their minds. The time would come to reveal their true selves to Eastville. But not yet. The next day, Amara found Lena waiting for her at her locker, clutching her books to her chest like a shield. I wanted to make sure you were okay, Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. After yesterday, I mean. Amara offered a genuine smile, her first since arriving in Eastville. It takes more than words to break me. Lena glanced around nervously before leaning closer. There's something you should know about this school. Her stutter seemed to fade when she spoke with purpose. My brother Damon. He was a senior here. Last year. Was? They said he got expelled for fighting, then transferred to another school. Lena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. But that's not what happened. He reported some hazing ritual to the administration. Dangerous stuff that was happening after hours. The next day, all his things were packed and my parents said he decided to finish school in another state. Her voice dropped even lower. But he would never leave without saying goodbye to me. Never. A cold feeling settled in Amara's stomach. You think something happened to him? I think he didn't leave town voluntarily, Lena confirmed, glancing around nervously. And I'm not the only one who's lost someone that way. The warning bell rang, cutting their conversation short. But as Amara headed to class, Lena's words echoed in her mind, connecting with the strange poster Ayo had found. At lunch, the twins once again sat alone with their traditional food. Connor and his followers seemed even more determined to make a spectacle of them. Look, the Jungle Kids brought their mud pies again, Connor announced loudly, strolling past their table. Jessa followed, her perfect ponytail swinging as she walked. Bet they ate with their hands before they came to civilization. Amara kept her eyes fixed on her food, though her jaw tightened visibly. Ayo maintained his calm, seemingly oblivious to the taunts. After lunch, Amara reached into her backpack for her history textbook and froze. Nestled between her books was a small plastic monkey toy, its garish colors and bulging eyes clearly meant as an insult. Someone had placed a tiny banana in its hand and written Amara's cousin on a piece of tape stuck to its chest. Heat rushed to her face as she quickly stuffed the toy back into her bag, but not before Jessa noticed from across the hall. Did you like our welcome gift? Jessa called out, her smile vicious. Connor thought you might be homesick for your relatives. Amara's fingers curled into fists at her sides. For a brief moment, the careful control she maintained wavered. A glimpse of the fighter beneath the surface threatening to emerge. But she forced herself to breathe, to remember her father's teachings. Later that afternoon, Ayo was walking Lena and Amara to their chemistry class when Jessa deliberately shouldered past them, sending Lena stumbling into the wall. The smaller girl's books scattered across the floor. Watch where you're going, stutter girl, Jessa snapped. Before Ayo could help Lena up, Connor appeared, positioning himself between Ayo and the girls. Got a problem, Jungle Boy? He challenged, shoving Ayo's shoulder. Ayo remained expressionless. No problem. We're just trying to get to class. Connor's face contorted with rage at Ayo's calm response. Without warning, he drove his fist into Ayo's ribs, a sharp, practiced punch that would have doubled over most students. Ayo absorbed the impact without flinching, his body automatically adjusting to disperse the force of the blow. He didn't raise his hands, didn't fight back. He simply stood there, looking Connor directly in the eyes. "What the hell?" Connor muttered, confusion crossing his face. Students had gathered to watch, expecting a fight. Whispers rippled through the crowd when Ayo made no move to retaliate. Is he scared? Why doesn't he do something? That should have hurt him. Even Jessa seemed unsettled by Ayo's non-reaction. She tugged on Connor's arm. "Come on, he's not worth it. We'll be late for practice." As they walked away, Ayo calmly helped Lena gather her books. The hallway slowly emptied, but one boy remained, watching thoughtfully from beside a row of lockers. He was tall and lean, with sandy brown hair and serious eyes. One of Connor's friends, though his expression held none of the malice they'd come to expect. That night, as Ayo bandaged a small bruise from Connor's punch, a memory surfaced. Himself at 12 years old, facing a wooden board in his father's training room back home. His small fists had struck the board repeatedly, but it wouldn't break. Frustration had built inside him, until tears threatened. Again, Baba Olin had instructed, his voice firm but kind. Focus not on breaking the board, but on channeling your energy through it. "I can't do it," young Ayo had protested. "I'm not strong enough." His father had knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Strength is not just in the muscles, my son. It's in the mind, in the spirit. The world will expect anger from you. You must offer discipline instead. That is true power." On his 15th attempt, the board had finally snapped cleanly in two, not because Ayo had hit it harder, but because he had hit it right, with focus, with intention, with control. The following day, Ayo noticed Connor's friend, the quiet one who had watched the confrontation, observing him between classes. Unlike the others, this boy's gaze held curiosity rather than contempt. When their eyes met in the hallway, the boy quickly looked away, but not before Ayo caught something like respect in his expression. "That's Tyler Williams," Lena explained when Ayo asked about him at lunch. "He's on the track team with Connor, but he's different. Keeps to himself mostly. Smart too. He's in all the advanced classes." That evening, after Mama Moyo had gone to bed, Ayo and Amara slipped out of the house. The school grounds were deserted, security lights casting long shadows across the empty parking lot.
Using the skills their father had taught them, they moved silently across the campus, avoiding the single security camera mounted above the main entrance. A maintenance door at the back of the gym yielded easily to Amara's lock-picking skills.
Another unexpected talent hidden beneath her quiet exterior. Inside, the gymnasium was eerily silent, basketball hoops looming like dark sentinels in the gloom. The poster mentioned, "After Hours." Ayo whispered, scanning the space. "This has to be connected." They methodically searched the gym, finding nothing unusual until Amara noticed something odd about the bleachers on the far wall. When fully retracted, they should have sat flush against the wall, but there was a gap, barely visible in the dim light. Working together, they found a hidden latch that revealed a narrow staircase behind the bleachers. It led down to a basement area that wasn't on any school map they'd seen. The space had been converted into a crude fighting arena, worn mats covering the floor, portable lights mounted on stands, and a whiteboard with a list of initials and match results. Several names were circled with red ink. "This is it," Amara breathed, running her fingers over the whiteboard. DM versus JT, winner JT. Could DM be Damon Miller, Lena's brother? Ayo examined the space with a fighter's eye. This isn't just some amateur fight club. Look at the setup, the organization. Someone with resources is running this. They photographed everything before carefully replacing the equipment exactly as they'd found it. By the time they slipped back through their bedroom window, it was nearly 3 in the morning. The light in the hallway flicked on. "Where have you been?" Mama Moyo stood in their doorway, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of concern and disappointment. There was no point in lying. The twins explained what they'd discovered: the bullying, Lena's missing brother, the underground fighting ring. Mama Moyo listened without interruption, her face growing more troubled with each detail. When they finished, she sat heavily on the edge of Amara's bed. "Your father and I brought you here for a fresh start, away from the troubles back home," she said softly. "But it seems trouble finds you no matter where we go." "We can handle it, Mama," Ao assured her. "We've been trained." "You were trained to protect yourselves and others," she interrupted firmly. "Not to seek conflict, not to put yourselves in danger." "But Lena's brother," Amara began. "May indeed need help," Mama Moyo acknowledged. "But rushing blindly into darkness is not the way." Her voice softened as she looked at each of them in turn. "If you enter darkness, my children, you must bring your own light." The next day, Lena approached them before first period, her face animated with a nervous energy they hadn't seen before. She clutched a worn notebook to her chest. "I've been keeping track," she whispered, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Ever since Damon disappeared. Students who suddenly transfer, schedule changes, strange patterns." She opened the notebook, revealing detailed maps of the school, student names, secret schedules, a web of information that had taken months to compile. For someone so quiet, Lena had proven remarkably observant. "I knew something was happening," she continued, "but I didn't know what. Then I saw how Connor and his friends reacted to you two, how threatened they seemed by your presence." Amara and Ao exchanged glances. "We found something last night," Amara admitted, pulling Lena into an empty classroom, a fighting ring hidden underneath the gym. Lena's eyes widened, not with surprise but with validation. "I knew it. Damon was a fighter, trained in MMA since he was 10. The week before he disappeared, he told me he'd been invited to join some exclusive club. He was excited at first, then scared." The bell rang, signaling 1 minute until first period. "We need to talk more," Io said, squeezing Lena's shoulder gently. "Meet us in the library during lunch period." As they headed to their separate classes, the twins shared a look of grim determination. The mystery of Eastville High was deeper and more dangerous than they'd initially thought, but for the first time since arriving, they had purpose, and an ally who understood the risks. They were no longer just the new kids, the outsiders, the targets of ignorant bullying. They were becoming something far more dangerous to those in power, investigators uncovering a truth someone desperately wanted to keep hidden, and as Baba Olan had taught them from the beginning, knowledge, properly applied, was the most powerful weapon of all. The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of the school library as Ao, Amara, and Lena huddled at a corner table, their voices barely above whispers. After discovering the underground fighting ring, the twins had agreed to meet Lena during their free period to compare notes. The library was nearly empty, perfect for secret conversations. "I have something to show you," Lena said, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled a small USB drive from her pocket. "I've been afraid to watch this again, but you need to see it." She plugged the drive into her laptop and angled the screen away from the librarian's desk. A grainy security video began playing, showing a dimly lit hallway. The timestamp indicated it was from nearly 11 months ago. "That's my brother," Lena whispered, pointing to a tall young man with the same copper hair as hers. He was arguing with an older man, Coach Bennett, the wrestling coach. Though there was no audio, the confrontation was clearly heated. Damon's face was flushed with anger as he gestured emphatically. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway flickered. When they came back on seconds later, Coach Bennett was alone, straightening his tie. Damon had vanished. "This is the last footage anyone has of my brother at school," Lena said, her voice catching. "The official story is that he was expelled for threatening a teacher and transferred to another school. But the next day, all his things were packed up, and my parents said he'd decided to finish senior year in Michigan with our uncle." She closed the laptop, her eyes hard with certainty. Damon would never leave without saying goodbye to me. Never. Amara reached across the table, squeezing Lena's hand. We believe you. The school must have doctored this footage, Ayo mused, his expression thoughtful. But you managed to get a copy before they could alter all of them? Lena nodded. Damon had a friend in the AV club who noticed the cameras in that hallway were disabled the day after this happened. He made me a copy, but he was too scared to go to the police. She lowered her voice further. 2 weeks later, that friend also transferred. The twins exchanged troubled glances. The situation was darker than they'd initially suspected. During the next few days, Amara began systematically mapping out the social hierarchy of Eastville High. She observed lunch tables, tracked group movements between classes, and noted which teachers overlooked certain students' behaviors. Her father had taught her that understanding power structures was essential to navigating any environment. Connor isn't the real problem, she told Ayo one evening as they practiced silent kicks in their bedroom. He's just the muscle. It's Jessa who's pulling the strings. How can you tell? Ayo asked, executing a perfect roundhouse kick that stopped mere inches from his sister's face. She didn't flinch. Watch her eyes during lunch tomorrow, Amara replied, countering with a series of rapid jabs that her brother blocked effortlessly. She signals him when to act, when to back off. And notice how she's always watching the teacher's reactions, calculating. Connor's just a weapon, she points. Meanwhile, Ayo had noticed Tyler Williams, Connor's supposedly loyal friend, observing them with increasing frequency. Unlike Connor's open hostility, Tyler's attention seemed almost protective. During PE, when Connor accidentally hurled a dodgeball at Amara's head, Tyler had deliberately stepped into its path, claiming it was his own mistake. One afternoon, Tyler was noticeably absent from school. That same day, Ayo overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. He'd stayed late to complete a chemistry lab and was cutting through the parking lot when a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the school entrance. The back window rolled down to reveal a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair, Mayor Rourke, Connor's father. Make sure those African twins stay quiet, the mayor was saying to Principal Stone, who stood nervously beside the vehicle. My boy says they've been asking questions, snooping around places they shouldn't. They're just trying to fit in, the principal replied weakly. Kids their age are naturally curious. Curiosity can be dangerous, Mayor Rourke snapped. If they start digging into the program, everything we've built could collapse. Keep them away from the gym after hours, understand? Use whatever excuse you need. The conversation confirmed their suspicions, whatever was happening in the underground. Ring had support from the highest levels of Eastville's authority. But why was the town's mayor involved in a high school fighting ring? That evening, Tyler showed up at the twins' house looking exhausted and on edge. My dad had dinner with Mayor Rourke tonight, he explained when Amara opened the door. I overheard things you need to know. Mama Moyo invited him in, serving sweet tea while the 3 teenagers sat in the living room. Tyler kept glancing at the windows as if expecting someone to be watching. My family's lived in Eastville for generations, he began, staring into his glass. My father's the town judge. He's always pressured me to be friends with Connor because of the Rourke family's influence. He looked up, his expression pained. I've watched Connor bully kids for years, but lately it's gotten worse. Much worse? The fighting ring, Ayo prompted. Tyler nodded. It started about 2 years ago. Supposedly, it was just an elite training program for the best athletes. Then kids started disappearing. Always the strongest fighters, the ones who asked too many questions, or the ones who won against the wrong people. Like Lena's brother, Amara murmured. Exactly like Damon, Tyler confirmed. He was one of the best fighters they'd ever recruited, but he started questioning the operation. He found out they were drugging some of the fighters to make them more aggressive, more compliant. When he threatened to expose them, he trailed off, his implication clear. But what's the purpose? Mama Moyo asked, her normally serene face clouded with concern. Why risk so much for a high school fighting club? Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper. It's not just a club. They're recording the fights, selling them to private collectors who bet massive amounts of money. And they're recruiting. The best fighters get scholarships that are actually contracts to compete in underground circuits across the country. The next day, Io spent his lunch period in the town library, searching archived newspaper articles. In a dusty corner, he discovered a bulletin board labeled Eastville High School Transfers, photographs of students who had left suddenly over the past 3 years. He recognized some of the names from the whiteboard in the underground ring. But what chilled him most were the 3 faces marked with small yellow stars. Below them, a handwritten note from a librarian. Missing persons reports filed, no follow-up. These weren't just students who had transferred, they had vanished, and no one in authority seemed concerned. When he showed his findings to Amara and Lena, they began connecting more dots. The fighting ring wasn't just exploiting students, it was potentially trafficking them. Later that week, Io opened his locker to find a folded note wedged into the vent. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. They're watching you. Stay out of the gym after hours. T, the warning only. Strengthened their resolve. That night, Amara decided to take a dangerous step, attending one of the underground fights to gather intelligence. Using makeup techniques their father had taught them for stealth operations, she disguised herself as one of the quiet senior girls who always blended into the background. The fight wasn't held in the school gym this time, but in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Amara slipped in with a group of students, keeping her head down and her body language submissive, just another spectator excited for the show. The makeshift arena was larger than she'd expected, with actual stadium seating. Surrounding a raised platform, professional lighting equipment illuminated the fighting area, and several high-end cameras were positioned at strategic angles. This was no amateur operation. Mayor Rourke himself presided over the event from a special section, surrounded by men in expensive suits who were clearly not from Eastville. Money changed hands openly as fighters were announced. The main event featured a masked fighter known only as the Ghost versus a muscular senior Amara recognized from the wrestling team. The Ghost moved with unnatural precision, effective but oddly mechanical, as if following programming rather than instinct. During one exchange near her section, the fighter's sleeve rode up, revealing a distinctive tattoo on his forearm. 3 interlocking triangles. Amara's heart raced. She'd seen that design before, in a photo on Lena's desk of her brother, Damon. The Ghost wasn't just another fighter. He was Damon Miller, supposedly halfway across the country but actually fighting right here in Eastville, his movements suggesting he was under some kind of control. As the school week progressed, Connor's behavior toward the twins grew increasingly hostile. He seemed to be watching Ao with particular intensity, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You're not what you seem," he cornered Ao one day after gym class, his voice low and threatening. "Nobody takes a hit like you did and doesn't flinch. Nobody." Ao maintained his calm facade. "Maybe I just have a high pain tolerance. Or maybe you're hiding something," Connor hissed. "I'm going to figure you out, Jungle Boy, and then I'm going to break you in front of everyone." Connor's growing obsession was becoming dangerous. In the cafeteria, he loudly announced to his circle that he could take down that African kid with one hand tied behind my back, his voice carrying deliberately to where Ao sat. "He's trying to provoke you," Amara warned her brother as they walked home that afternoon. "He wants you to show your skills so he can report back to his father." "I know," Ao replied quietly. "But how long can we keep pretending? If Damon is being used like a fighting machine, others probably are too. We can't just watch it happen." For the first time since arriving in Eastville, the twins found themselves at odds. Amara wanted to take action immediately, to expose the fighting ring, find evidence of the mayor's involvement, and rescue Damon. Ao counseled patience, believing they needed more information before risking direct confrontation. Their disagreement came to a head that evening in their bedroom, voices rising until Lena, who had been helping with their research, had to step between them. "Fighting each other is exactly what they want," she reminded them, her stutter completely gone when she spoke with conviction. "We need to be smarter than that." As they calmed down, Mama Moyo appeared in the doorway, a knowing sadness in her eyes. She carried their grandfather's talking drum, placing it gently on Ayo's desk. "The ancestors speak louder when silence becomes dangerous," she said softly. "Your father would say it's time to listen." That night, as Eastville slept, the twins sat facing each other with the drum between them. They didn't play it. They didn't need to. Its mere presence served as a reminder of who they were, where they came from, and the wisdom of generations that flowed through their veins. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they found their center again, together, as they had always been. Morning dawned with a social media firestorm. Someone had created a fake screenshot of direct messages supposedly sent from Amara to Connor, making it appear she was begging him not to hurt her brother. The messages portrayed her as terrified and submissive, reinforcing every stereotype the bullies had tried to pin on them. By first period, everyone at Eastville High had seen the fabricated conversation. Students pointed and whispered as the twins walked through the halls. "Pathetic," one football player sneered as Amara passed. "Begging for mercy already." Amara maintained her composure, though inside she was seething. Ayo walked beside her, his expression revealing nothing but his eyes constantly scanning, assessing the shifting social dynamics around them. The fake messages had accomplished their goal, isolating the twins even further while building Connor's reputation as someone to be feared. The tension built throughout the morning until lunchtime, when Connor decided to escalate the situation. He approached their table, Jessa and several others flanking him like a royal entourage. "Got any more messages for me, Jungle Girl?" Connor asked loudly, ensuring everyone in the cafeteria could hear. "Maybe you'd like to beg in person this time." Amara kept eating, not looking up. Connor leaned closer. "Your brother's just as pathetic as you are. All that silent treatment. I bet he screams like a little bitch when I finally—" What happened next occurred so quickly that even Ayo didn't have time to intervene. Amara's hand shot out, connecting with Connor's face in a perfect open-palmed slap. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent cafeteria. Connor staggered back, more from shock than pain, his cheek blazing red with the imprint of her hand. "Don't you ever," Amara said, her voice deadly quiet, "talk about my brother that way." Before Connor could recover, Principal Stone appeared at the edge of the cafeteria, drawn by the commotion. "What is going on here?" he demanded, looking from Amara's still raised hand to Connor's marked face. "She attacked me," Connor sputtered, his outrage only partially feigned. Completely unprovoked, students who had witnessed the entire exchange looked away, suddenly interested in their lunches. No one spoke up to contradict Connor's version of events. "Ms. Moyo, my office, now," Principal Stone ordered, not bothering to question any other witnesses. The injustice burned in Amara's chest as she sat outside the principal's office, waiting while Principal Stone called her mother. Through the partially open door, she could hear his side of the conversation. "Physical violence is taken very seriously at Eastville High, Mrs. Moyo. Yes, I understand children can be difficult in new environments, but striking another student— No, I don't think we need to hear Amara's side. Several students witnessed the incident. 3 days of detention should give her time to reflect on proper conflict resolution." When Amara finally returned to class, the hallways were buzzing with a new development. Connor had publicly challenged Ayo to a fight, after school behind the gymnasium, where teachers rarely patrolled. Word had spread rapidly, with students already placing bets on how quickly Connor would destroy the new kid. Ayo had accepted, with a single nod, his silence interpreted by everyone as fear or resignation to the inevitable beating. Only Amara recognized the subtle shift in her brother's demeanor, a sharpening of focus, a slight adjustment in his stance that signaled he had made a decision. "You're not actually going to fight him," she whispered during their shared history class. "I'm going to end this," Ayo replied softly. "Not his way. My way." Tyler caught up with them between periods, his expression worried. "You don't have to do this. Connor's been training in that underground ring for months. He's dangerous." "So am I," Ayo said simply. By the final bell, nearly half the school had made plans to witness the confrontation. As students streamed toward the back of the gymnasium, Amara and Lena exchanged concerned glances. This had escalated beyond a simple schoolyard fight. It had become a public spectacle that would either cement Connor's dominance or shatter it completely. Meanwhile, at home, Mama Moyo seemed to sense what was coming. When Ayo said he'd be home late due to a school situation, she didn't press for details. Instead, she went to her room and returned with a small cloth pouch filled with healing herbs and a strip of fabric that had belonged to their father. "Your father had many fights in his life," she said, pressing the items into Ayo's hand. "Some with his body, more with his mind. He always said the victory that matters happens here." She touched her son's forehead gently. "You already won, my son. Remember that." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the school grounds, a crowd formed a loose circle behind the gymnasium. Connor stood in the center, already shirtless, showing off the muscular physique he'd developed through years of sports and, more recently, underground fighting. Jessa stood nearby, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Ayo arrived with Amara and Lena flanking him. He wore the same plain t-shirt and jeans he'd had on all day, making no special preparations for what was to come. The contrast between the two opponents couldn't have been more stark, Connor posturing and shadowboxing for the crowd, Ayo standing perfectly still, his breathing calm and measured. "Didn't think you'd actually show," Connor called out, cracking, his knuckles theatrically. "Ready to get your ass kicked back to Africa, Jungle Boy?" Ayo said nothing, simply stepping forward into the circle. He assumed no fighting stance, his arms hanging loosely at his sides. Connor mistook this for weakness or fear, a smirk spreading across his face as he circled Ayo predatorily. "No teachers to save you now," he taunted, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Just you and me." The first punch came fast, a right hook aimed directly at Ayo's jaw with enough force to knock out most opponents. But where Ayo should have been, there was only empty air. He had shifted slightly, the minimum movement needed to avoid the blow entirely. Connor's momentum carried him forward awkwardly. Confused and angered, he attacked again, a flurry of punches and kicks that demonstrated actual fighting training. None connected. Ayo moved with fluid grace, each evasion so subtle it almost appeared as if Connor was simply missing rather than Ayo actively dodging. The crowd grew quiet, the expected beatdown transforming into something they didn't understand. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. Is he even trying to fight back? How is he doing that? Connor can't touch him. Frustration contorted Connor's features as sweat began pouring down his face. His attacks grew wilder, more desperate. Still, Ayo made no offensive moves, merely avoiding each strike with minimal effort, his expression serene, almost detached. 5 minutes passed this way, Connor attacking relentlessly, Ayo evading effortlessly. The bully's breathing became labored, his movements slowing. Fatigue and humiliation fueled his rage. "Fight back, you coward," Connor screamed, lunging forward with a haymaker that would have broken Ayo's nose if it had landed. In one smooth motion, Ayo caught Connor's fist mid-air, stopping it completely. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. For the first time since the confrontation began, Ayo spoke. "You've already lost," he said quietly, holding Connor's fist firmly but without apparent effort. "Not because I'm stronger, because you fight from hatred, and hatred always exhausts itself." Then, still holding Connor's fist, Ayo bowed slightly, a gesture of respect from martial arts tradition, before releasing the bully's hand and simply walking away. The silence that followed was absolute. Connor stood frozen, his arm still extended, face flushed with a complex mixture of rage, confusion, and the dawning realization that he had been completely outclassed by someone who hadn't even thrown a punch. "That's it?" Jessa's voice shattered. The silence, her practiced confidence cracking. "You're just walking away?" Ayo didn't respond, continuing toward his sister and Lena without looking back. Someone in the crowd had been recording the entire encounter. By evening, the video had spread throughout Eastville High's social networks. Comments exploded across platforms. "Did you see how fast he moved? Connor couldn't land a single hit. Who is this guy? The kid who doesn't hit back." This new nickname spread rapidly, transforming Ayo from an object of ridicule to one of fascination overnight. Connor's humiliation was complete, his carefully constructed image as Eastville's apex predator shattered by someone who hadn't even deemed him worth fighting. The power dynamics that had ruled the school for years shifted precariously in the aftermath. That night, Connor's rage found no outlet, no release. He barricaded himself in an empty classroom, overturning desks and smashing equipment in blind fury. When Jessa found him, he was breathing heavily, surrounded by destruction. "This isn't part of the plan," she hissed, glancing nervously at the damage. "You're supposed to be in control." "He humiliated me," Connor snarled. "Everyone saw it. Those twins are ruining everything." "Your father won't be pleased," Jessa warned. "We were supposed to keep them intimidated, not turn them into celebrities." Connor's eyes darkened. "My father said to handle it, so I'm handling it, my way." The threat hung in the air between them, ominous and undefined. Later that evening, as the twins shared the events of the day with Mama Moyo over dinner, she listened with pride tinged with concern. "You acted with honor today," she told Ao, squeezing his hand. "Your father would be proud, but remember, those who lose power rarely surrender it gracefully. Be vigilant." Her warning proved prophetic. Shortly after midnight, the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet of their home. Ayo was instantly alert, moving silently to Amara's bed to wake her. They communicated without words, using hand signals their father had taught them years ago. Intruders. Multiple. Downstairs, Amara nodded, slipping from her bed like a shadow. Together they moved to their bedroom door, listening intently. Heavy footsteps moved through the living room below, at least 3 people making no effort to conceal their presence. A sharp cry from Mama Moyo's room spurred them into action. They raced down the hallway to find 2 masked men dragging their mother from her bed. A third stood in the doorway, keeping watch. What followed was unlike the controlled display Ayo had shown at school. The twins moved with lethal precision, their years of training unleashed at full force. Amara delivered a perfectly executed kick to the kidney of the man holding her mother, causing him to release his grip and crumple to the floor. Ayo simultaneously struck the second intruder with a series of rapid blows to nerve centers that left him temporarily paralyzed. The third man turned to flee, but found Amara blocking his path. He swung a heavy flashlight at her head. She ducked under the arc of his swing and swept his legs from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. All 3 intruders managed to scramble to their feet and escape through the front door, leaving behind a single ski mask and the distinct impression that they hadn't expected their victims to fight back so effectively. As they secured the broken window and called the police, Mama Moyo sat shaking on the edge of her bed, clutching her arm, where she'd been roughly handled. A bruise was already forming on her temple where she'd been pushed against the wall. The responding officers took statements, but seemed strangely reluctant to pursue the case aggressively. Probably just local kids causing trouble, one officer suggested, despite the twins' insistence that these were grown men who had targeted them specifically. After the police left, Mama Moyo applied healing herbs to her bruises while the twins secured the house as best they could. In the kitchen, Amara's hands trembled slightly as she made tea, not from fear, but from barely contained fury. "They came into our home," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "They put their hands on Mama." Ao shared her anger, but his expression remained controlled. This wasn't random. This was a message from Connor, or more likely his father. They stayed together in the living room for the remainder of the night, taking turns keeping watch. As dawn broke, Amara took her brother's hand, their fingers interlocking as they had countless times throughout their lives. "No more holding back," she said firmly. "We tried it their way. We stayed quiet, didn't make waves. And they came for Mama anyway." Ao looked into his sister's eyes, seeing his own resolve mirrored there. After a moment, he nodded. "You're right. It's time we fight back. With strategy." The patience they had maintained since arriving in Eastville had served its purpose. It had given them time to understand the terrain, identify their enemies, and find allies. Now, that patience had reached its natural end. The twins would no longer hide who they truly were. Rain drummed steadily against the rusted metal roof, creating a rhythmic backdrop that matched the twins' movements. Abandoned for nearly a decade, the old Patterson warehouse on the outskirts of Eastville had become their sanctuary. Here, miles from prying eyes, Ayo and Amara could finally unleash the full extent of their training. 3 days had passed since the break-in at their home. 3 days since they'd made the decision to stop hiding. 3 days of careful planning, gathering allies and preparing for what was to come. Again, Ayo instructed, circling his sister as she executed a complex sequence of strikes against a makeshift training dummy. Faster this time. Remember what Baba taught us. Unpredictability is your shield. Amara nodded, sweat glistening on her forehead despite the cool air. She repeated the sequence, her movements so quick they blurred, in the dim light filtering through the warehouse's grimy windows. Without warning, Ayo attacked from her blind spot. She sensed rather than saw him coming, dropping to a crouch and sweeping his legs from under him. He rolled with the fall, springing back to his feet with a satisfied nod. Better. For the next hour, they sparred intensely. Blindfolded kicks, silent kata drills, endurance exercises that pushed their bodies to the limit. This wasn't the restrained practice they'd confined themselves to in their bedroom. This was training with purpose and controlled fury, each movement honed to protect themselves and those they cared about. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the warehouse floor, they heard the crunch of gravel outside. Both instantly froze, moving silently to defensive positions on either side of the main entrance. The heavy door creaked open, and Lena stepped inside, clutching her notebook and a backpack. "Just me," she called out, knowing better than to surprise them. "I brought the maps and those old blueprints of the school I found in the library archives." The twins relaxed, emerging from the shadows. Lena had proven herself a valuable ally, her quiet demeanor hiding a determined spirit and a brilliant, analytical mind. "Did anyone follow you?" Amara asked, accepting the bottle of water Lena offered. "No, I took the long route like you showed me." Lena hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "I want to be more than just the brains of this operation. I need to learn to defend myself too." The request didn't surprise them. Since discovering that her brother was alive but being controlled by whatever sinister forces ran the underground fights, Lena had grown increasingly resolute. "It won't be easy," Ayo warned gently. "We've been training since we were 5 years old." Lena stood taller, her usual stutter completely absent when she spoke with conviction. "I've been watching my brother's MMA videos since he disappeared. I know the basics, and I'm tired of being afraid." The twins exchanged glances, communicating silently as they often did. Then Amara smiled, stepping forward to guide Lena to the center of the makeshift training area. "We'll start with stance and breathing," she said. "Everything begins there." Over the next hour, they taught Lena basic defensive positions and strikes, correcting her form with patient instruction. To their surprise, she absorbed the teachings quickly, her body remembering movements she'd observed her brother practicing countless times. "You're a natural," Ayo encouraged after she successfully blocked a series of slow, controlled attacks from Amara. Lena blushed slightly at the praise but continued practicing the movements with determination. When we find my brother, I want to be strong enough to help him." Their training session was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a car engine approaching. This time, it wasn't Lena's old hatchback, but the low purr of something more powerful. The three froze, exchanging alarmed glances. "Hide," Ayo whispered, pointing Lena toward a stack of old crates. The twins positioned themselves strategically, ready to confront whoever had found their secret training ground. The warehouse door swung open, and a tall figure stepped inside, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Don't attack," Tyler Williams called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I know you're in here. I need to talk to you." Ayo emerged first, his stance cautious. "How did you find us?" "Followed Lena," Tyler admitted, lowering his hand slowly. "But only because I've been trying to catch one of you alone all week. You guys are never without backup now." Amara appeared on Tyler's other side, effectively boxing him in. "Why were you looking for us?" Tyler reached slowly into his jacket, pulling out a small flash drive. "Because I've been filming the Fight Club. For months, and I want to help you. Take it down." Inside the warehouse office, they clustered around Lena's laptop, watching grainy footage of underground fights. Tyler had placed hidden cameras throughout the training facilities and captured dozens of matches, including several featuring Lena's brother. "I started suspecting something was wrong last year," Tyler explained, his face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. "My dad is close with Mayor Rourke, so I've been around Connor most of my life. When he suddenly got involved in this exclusive athletic program, everything changed. He became more aggressive, more secretive." "Why risk helping us?" Amara asked, studying Tyler's face for any sign of deception. Tyler's jaw tightened. "Because 3 months ago, my cousin disappeared the same way Damon did. Official story was he transferred to a private school in Vermont, but all his social media went dead overnight, and my aunt and uncle suddenly had a new car and renovated their house. They refused to talk about him." The footage continued playing, showing pale, dazed fighters with blank expressions. One sequence captured Mayor Rourke and Principal Stone meeting with a well-dressed stranger in an office adjacent to the fighting area. "That's Richard Klein," Tyler said, pausing the video on the stranger's face. "He represents some sort of talent agency out of Chicago. He comes to town every few months for what they call showcase nights." "They're not just running local fights," Lena realized, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're supplying fighters to someone bigger." The following day, while Mama Moyo was at the hospital for a follow-up appointment for her injuries, Ao slipped into the school during lunch period. Using the access code Tyler had provided, he entered the server room adjacent to the computer lab. The school's security system was surprisingly sophisticated for a small-town high school, another sign that something valuable needed protection. With Tyler's instructions guiding him, Ao located and copied several encrypted video files labeled with fighter initials and dates. That evening, they gathered again at the warehouse to review the findings. One video showed Lena's brother in a fight from 6 months ago. He was losing badly until a masked trainer approached between rounds, administering something from a small vial. In the next round, Damon fought with mechanical precision, his eyes vacant as he brutally defeated his opponent. Lena choked back a sob, watching her brother being transformed into a weapon. "That's not him," she whispered. "Damon never fought like that, with cruelty." While Ao comforted Lena, Amara and Tyler cross-referenced the footage with school records Tyler had borrowed from the administrative office. Half of the fighters in the videos were officially listed as transferred students. The pattern was undeniable. "They're identifying the best fighters, drugging them into compliance, and then shipping them off to fight professionally in underground circuits," Amara summarized, disgust evident in her voice. "And they're using high school students with no other options." "Not just any students," Tyler added grimly. "Notice the pattern? Most of them are from families without much influence, kids from the edges of town, or outsiders like you two." The next morning, Mama Moyo called the twins into her room before school. She looked tired but resolute as she handed them a sealed envelope with their father's handwriting. "Your father left this with me before he sent us here," she explained, her accent thickening with emotion. "He said to give it to you if you ever faced a fight that seemed impossible." Inside, they found a map marked with several locations around Eastville, a handwritten prayer chant in their native language, and a phrase written in their father's bold script: "Strike only when truth is louder than the lie." Baba knew. "Amara?" asked, stunned. Mama Moyo sighed, touching the bruise on her temple that was slowly fading to yellow. "Your father has many connections. He heard rumors about Eastville, young fighters disappearing, families suddenly wealthy. He sent us here not to escape trouble, but to confront it. Why didn't you tell us?" Ayo's voice held no accusation. "Only curiosity, because you needed to discover it yourselves," she answered, squeezing both their hands. "Some battles cannot be fought for you, only alongside you." That evening, as rain pounded the warehouse roof once more, Amara slipped away, while Ao was working with Tyler on decrypting more files. She moved silently through the darkened streets of Eastville, a hood pulled low over her face, her destination clear in her mind. Connor's house, a sprawling colonial mansion on the wealthiest street in town, glowed with soft light from within. Security lights illuminated the manicured lawn, but the side gate was unguarded. Amara scaled the fence easily, landing in a crouch beside a row of perfectly trimmed hedges. Years of training had prepared her for this moment. Every silent step, every controlled breath, every shadow she melted into, all of it leading to this opportunity for justice. Or was it revenge? The line had blurred since the night intruders had put their hands on her mother. Connor's bedroom window was on the second floor, partially open despite the cool evening. Amara scaled the decorative trellis like a phantom, positioning herself just outside, listening to Connor's voice as he spoke on the phone. "I don't care what my father says," he was saying, his voice tight with anger. "Those twins have made everything complicated. I'm handling it my way tomorrow." Amara's fingers tightened on the windowsill. One quick movement and she could be inside, confronting Connor directly, making him pay for what he'd done to their family, to Lena's brother, to countless others. "Amara!" Ayo's voice came from below, barely audible above the rain. He stood in the shadows of the garden, his expression unreadable, but his message clear. This was not their way. She closed her eyes briefly, mastering the rage that had driven her here. Then, as silently as she had come, she descended, meeting her brother on the wet grass. "I just wanted to," she began. "I know." Ayo cut her off gently. "But that's what they expect from us. They want us to act from anger so they can label us as dangerous, as exactly what they've been saying we are." They walked home in silence, rain soaking through their clothes. Amara knew her brother was right, but the fire inside her refused to be extinguished completely. There had to be a way to fight that honored their training while still delivering justice. The answer came the following day in the form of a sealed envelope delivered to Ayo's locker. Inside was an ornate invitation card with embossed lettering. "Selected fighters are invited to participate in the spring showcase this Friday at 11 p.m. Location to be provided upon acceptance. Exceptional talent will be considered for regional advancement opportunities." At the bottom, scrawled in Connor's handwriting, "Time to see what you jungle kids are really made of. Be there, or everyone finds out you're cowards." Tyler confirmed. It was legitimate. The spring showcase was the biggest underground event of the year, with scouts from various fighting circuits in attendance. It was also the most heavily guarded and exclusive, with only specially invited fighters and high-paying spectators allowed. "It's a trap," Lena warned as they discussed the invitation at the warehouse. "Connor wants to humiliate you in front of everyone. Or his father wants to recruit us if we're good enough," Amara countered. "Either way, it's our chance to get inside their operation completely." After hours of debate, the four allies reached an agreement. They would accept the invitation and enter the tournament, not just to win, but to expose everything. With Tyler's technical skills, Lena's detailed knowledge of the operation, and the twins' fighting abilities, they had the elements needed for a plan. That night, they made a pact. 4 hands joined in the center of their makeshift training space. 4 voices unified in purpose. They would enter the lion's den together, carrying truth as their strongest weapon. Friday night arrived with an unusual chill for spring. The twins stood before Mama Moyo in the living room, dressed in simple black athletic wear, their expressions solemn. "I cannot stop you," she said, adjusting Ayo's collar with maternal concern. "But promise me you will remember who you are no matter what happens tonight." "We promise, Mama," they replied in unison. She pressed her forehead to each of theirs in turn, a traditional blessing. "Your father would say, even in darkness, carry your own light. I say, come home to me, no matter what." The location for the spring showcase turned out to be a massive abandoned steel mill on the outskirts of town, transformed for the evening into a high-tech fighting arena. Luxury cars lined the makeshift parking area, and security guards with earpieces checked invitations at the entrance. The twins approached confidently, Tyler and Lena following slightly behind. Their invitations were scrutinized by a guard whose expression suggested he recognized them but couldn't quite place from where. "First-timers?" he asked gruffly. "We've been waiting for this opportunity," Ayo replied smoothly. The guard studied them for another moment before stepping aside. Fighters through the side entrance, spectators through the main doors. Inside, the scale of the operation stunned them despite their preparation. The mill's main floor had been converted into a professional fighting venue, with stadium seating surrounding a raised octagonal platform. Floodlights hung from the ceiling, illuminating the fighting area, while leaving the spectator sections in strategic shadow. High-end cameras were positioned at various angles, their red lights indicating they were already recording. "Those aren't just for the local audience," Tyler whispered, nodding toward the equipment. "They're streaming this somewhere." Lena spotted a technical booth on a mezzanine level. "That must be where they control the feeds. I need to get up there." While Tyler escorted Lena toward the spectator area, the twins were directed to a holding area where other fighters were preparing. Most wore hooded robes that obscured their identities, creating an atmosphere of anonymous tension. Mayor Rourke stood at the center of the room, flanked by Principal Stone and the well-dressed stranger they now knew was Richard Klein. He smiled when he spotted the twins, a predatory expression that never reached his eyes. "Our special guests have arrived," he announced, approaching them with exaggerated hospitality. "Connor mentioned you might be joining us tonight. I'm glad you accepted our invitation. We were curious about this exclusive program we've heard." "So much about," Amara replied, matching his false cordiality. "And now you're here to experience it firsthand." Mayor Rourke gestured toward the other fighters. "Some of Eastville's finest athletic talent is on display tonight. Mr. Klein here represents several sports management firms looking for unique prospects." Richard Klein assessed them with clinical detachment. "Twins are always a draw in the Thais fighting circuit, especially with your exotic background. The audiences appreciate diversity. The casual racism barely registered, they'd heard worse. What mattered was confirming their suspicions about where the fighters were being sent." One of the hooded figures nearby turned slightly at the sound of their voices. Through the shadows of the hood, a pair of eyes locked briefly with Amara's, familiar eyes that widened with a flash of recognition before quickly looking away. Lena's brother. "He was here. Fighters will be introduced shortly," Principal Stone informed them, checking his watch. "The brackets have already been determined." As the officials moved away to speak with other arrivals, Amara leaned close to her brother. "Damon is here. Third fighter from the left." Ayo nodded imperceptibly. "Stay on plan. Lena and Tyler need time to set up." A bell sounded, signaling the beginning of the event. The competitors were led into the main arena where spotlights dramatically illuminated their entrance. The crowd, a mix of Eastville's elite, students with connections and visitors in expensive suits, cheered and jeered as fighters were introduced by number rather than name. Mayor Rourke took center stage, his voice booming through professional grade speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Spring Showcase. Tonight's winners will receive more than just glory. They'll earn opportunities that could change their lives forever." In the shadows of the technical booth, Lena and Tyler worked quickly. Using the access codes Tyler had gathered over months of observation, they began copying the video feeds to an external drive while simultaneously preparing to broadcast the event beyond the closed circuit. "Security's tighter than we expected," Tyler whispered, fingers flying over a keyboard. "They've got encryption on everything." "Keep trying," Lena urged, her eyes constantly scanning for anyone approaching their position. "We need those files." Back in the arena, the first match was announced. Amara versus a fighter introduced only as number 8. A burly senior Amara recognized from the wrestling team. The crowd's reaction to seeing a female fighter was predictably sexist, with catcalls and skeptical murmurs rippling through the audience. Amara stepped onto the platform, centering herself as her opponent circled aggressively. He was significantly larger, using intimidation tactics as he flexed and shadow-boxed. When the bell rang, he charged forward with confidence, clearly expecting a quick victory. What followed shocked the audience into silence. Amara moved like water, flowing around his attacks with graceful precision. Where he relied on brute strength, she used technique and timing. When he overextended on a wild punch, she redirected his momentum, sending him crashing to the mat with a perfectly executed Throw! The fighter rose, rage replacing his initial confidence. His next attacks were more measured but ultimately futile. Amara continued fighting defensively, allowing him to exhaust himself while she remained fresh and focused. When the opportunity presented itself, she ended the match with a lightning fast combination that left her opponent dazed on the mat. The silence that followed was broken by scattered applause that quickly grew in volume. Amara bowed respectfully to her defeated opponent before walking calmly back to the fighter's area, her expression revealing nothing of the triumph she felt inside. Next came Ayo's match against a fighter known as the Beast, a reputation apparently earned through brutal efficiency. He had ended his last 3 matches in under 30 seconds, leaving opponents unconscious or injured. As Ayo took his position, he noticed Connor and Jessa watching intently from a reserved section. Connor's expression was a mixture of anticipation and malice, clearly hoping to see Ayo humiliated or hurt. The Beast lived up to his name, attacking with frightening speed and power the moment the match began. But where others had crumbled under the onslaught, Ayo seemed to anticipate every move, neutralizing attacks through superior positioning and technique rather than matching force with force. "Fight back!" someone yelled from the crowd as Ayo continued his defensive strategy. After nearly 2 minutes of frustrating his opponent, Ayo finally saw his opportunity. The Beast, growing desperate, left a momentary opening. Ayo's response was textbook perfection, a sweep that took the larger fighter's legs from under him, followed by a restraint hold that gave his opponent no choice but to tap out or risk injury. Ayo had won without throwing a single punch, demonstrating mastery that stunned the audience and officials alike. As he left the platform, he heard Mayor Rourke muttering to Richard Klein, "I told you they were special prospects." The tournament continued with Connor facing an unknown fighter, a bout that was clearly rigged in Connor's favor. His opponent moved sluggishly, his reactions delayed, his technique sloppy. Connor defeated him easily, playing to the crowd with excessive showmanship. While attention remained focused on the fights, Lena slipped away from the technical booth, determined to find evidence about what happened to the fighters who transferred. Following a hunch, she made her way to the administrative offices on the upper level of the mill. The first room contained nothing unusual, just paperwork and schedules for the evening's events. The second, however, was a revelation. Inside a locked cabinet, which yielded to the picking techniques Amara had taught her, she found vials of clear liquid labeled only with numbers, medical charts for various fighters, and, most disturbingly, legal documents with signatures that appeared forced or forged. Transfer agreements, she whispered to herself, quickly photographing everything with her phone. Consent forms that were never willingly signed. In the technical office, Tyler had finally broken through the security protocols. "I'm in," he muttered triumphantly, initiating an upload sequence that would broadcast the evening's events, along with incriminating footage from previous tournaments, to multiple secure sites he'd prepared. The videos would automatically release to local news outlets and law enforcement agencies outside Eastville's jurisdiction. The tournament approached its climactic matches. According to the bracket displayed on large screens around the arena, Amara would face fighter number 5 in the semifinals, the hooded competitor she had identified as Lena's brother. As they entered the ring, Amara could see the vacant expression in Damon's eyes more clearly. Whatever control they had over him was in full effect tonight. He moved mechanically, his naturally fluid fighting style replaced by something robotic and cold. When the match began, Amara fought defensively, watching Damon's technique closely for any sign of the person beneath the programming. She called out to him between exchanges using his name, mentioning Lena, anything to break through whatever was controlling him. "Damon, Lena is here. She's been looking for you for almost a year." For a moment, his attacks faltered. Something flickered. In his eyes, confusion, recognition, pain. Then it was gone, replaced by the blank stare as he pressed forward with renewed aggression. Amara changed tactics, incorporating movements and patterns from traditional fighting forms their father had taught them, techniques designed to harmonize energies rather than oppose them. As they moved across the platform in what almost resembled a dance, she began softly chanting in her native language, the prayer her father had included in his letter. "What is she doing?" Mayor Rourke demanded from ringside. This isn't a cultural exhibition. But something extraordinary was happening in the ring. Damon's movements began to sync with Amara's, his body responding to the rhythm of the chant despite his conscious mind remaining locked away. The mechanical quality of his fighting softened, replaced by something more natural, more human. When their eyes met again, there was a spark of awareness. Amara seized the moment, whispering, "Your sister needs you to come back, Damon." His entire body seemed to shudder, the drug's hold weakened by the combination of familiar movement patterns and emotional connection. Tears welled in his eyes as recognition dawned. "Lena," he whispered, before collapsing to his knees, overwhelmed by the sudden return of his consciousness after months of chemical suppression. The audience murmured in confusion. This wasn't the spectacular combat they'd expected. Mayor Rourke signaled frantically to security personnel, who began moving toward the ring. At that moment, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights began flashing as the building's security system detected Tyler's unauthorized access and data transmission. "We've been compromised," Principal Stone shouted, rushing toward the technical booth. "Shut it down. Shut everything down." Mayor Rourke grabbed a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing technical difficulties. Please remain seated while our staff resolves the issue." But it was too late. On screens throughout the arena, footage began playing, not of the current matches, but of previous tournaments, interspersed with clips of young fighters being drugged, Mayor Rourke making deals with Richard Klein, and forged documents being prepared. Chaos erupted as spectators realized what they were witnessing. Some rushed for the exits while others stayed, transfixed by the evidence of corruption unfolding before them. "Lock the exits," Mayor Rourke commanded. "No one leaves until we find who's responsible." Security guards moved to secure the building, effectively trapping everyone inside. Ayo and Amara exchanged glances across the arena. The situation had escalated beyond their original plan. Now it wasn't just about exposure. It was about survival. Connor, enraged by the disruption and the twins' obvious involvement, climbed onto the platform. "You," he shouted, pointing at Ayo. "This ends now. No rules, no referees, just you and me." The crowd, despite the chaos, responded to the challenge with renewed attention. A circle formed around the platform as Connor stripped off his shirt, revealing a physique clearly enhanced by more than just natural training. His eyes had the same slightly glazed quality they'd noticed in Damon and other fighters. "He's using their drugs," Amara realized, helping Damon to a safer position at the edge of the crowd. Ayo stepped forward to meet Connor in the center of the platform. This time, there would be no walking away, no passive resistance. The truth needed to be revealed completely, including the reality of who the twins really were. "Let's finish this," Ayo agreed, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed arena. The circle of light surrounding them seemed to isolate their confrontation from the larger chaos unfolding throughout the building, creating a moment of focused intensity amid the breakdown of the entire operation. The final confrontation was about to begin. The air in the steel mill crackled with tension as Ayo and Connor faced each other in the center of the platform. Around them, chaos unfolded. Spectators pushing toward exits only to find them locked, security guards scrambling to regain control, and screens throughout the venue continuing to broadcast evidence of the criminal enterprise. Yet within the spotlight circle, time seemed suspended. Connor's eyes held a wild, drug-enhanced fury as he circled Ayo predatorily. "No more running," Connor sneered, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed arena. "No more dodging. Let's see what you're really made of, Jungle Boy." Ayo remained centered, his breathing calm and measured despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "This isn't just about you and me anymore," he replied evenly. "Look around. Your father's empire is crumbling." Connor lunged without warning, throwing a blinding combination of punches that would have incapacitated most opponents. Ayo moved with practiced precision, deflecting rather than dodging, conserving energy while allowing Connor to expend his. "Stand still and fight!" Connor screamed, frustration building as his attacks failed to land with full force. For the first several minutes of the confrontation, Ayo maintained his defensive strategy, the same approach he'd used in their schoolyard. Encounter. But this time, when Connor overextended on a wild haymaker, Io countered with a lightning-fast strike to his opponent's solar plexus. The crowd gasped. This was not the passive resistance they'd witnessed before. This was something else entirely. Controlled, precise, devastating. Connor staggered back, shock registering on his face as he struggled to breathe. When he recovered, rage replaced surprise. He charged forward, all technique abandoned in favor of brute force. "You're dead!" What followed was unlike anything the underground fighting ring had ever witnessed. Connor attacked with drug-fueled strength and speed, throwing illegal strikes, attempting to gouge eyes and target joints, fighting with the desperation of someone who knew his world was collapsing. Ayo met this fury not with matching aggression, but with surgical precision. Each of Connor's wild attacks was answered with a calculated counter that inflicted maximum effect with minimal force, the fighting philosophy his father had instilled in both twins since childhood. As Connor began to tire, Ayo seized a moment, when the crowd's attention was fully focused on their battle. With his opponent temporarily off balance, he stepped back and addressed the spectators directly, his voice carrying with unexpected authority. "You used fists to prove power," he called out, circling Connor with calm confidence. "I'll use mine to show purpose." In a fluid sequence too fast for untrained eyes to follow, Io executed a combination that ended with Connor sprawled unconscious on the mat. Ayo stood over his fallen opponent, breathing steadily despite the exertion. "This is not victory," he said to the stunned onlookers. "This is awakening." Across the arena, Amara was helping Damon to his feet when 3 security guards approached, batons drawn. Without hesitation, she shifted to a protective stance. "Stay back," she warned, her voice steady. The lead guard lunged forward. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion for those watching. Amara moved like quicksilver, disarming the first guard with a twist of his wrist that sent his baton clattering across the floor. The second guard rushed her from behind, but Damon, though still shaky, intercepted him with a tackle that spoke of muscle memory overriding his drugged state. The third guard hesitated, then raised his hands in surrender. "I'm just doing my job, lady." "Your job included kidnapping teenagers?" Amara challenged, not lowering her guard. Throughout the facility, similar confrontations erupted as security personnel attempted to regain control. But the dynamics had shifted dramatically. Students who had been mere spectators began actively resisting, many recording everything on their phones, others helping to barricade doors from the inside to prevent more security from entering. Most surprising was the transformation of several of Connor's former friends. Tyler had emerged from the technical booth to find himself surrounded by guards, only to be unexpectedly rescued by members of the track team who had witnessed the video evidence. "I've known something was wrong for months," explained one senior, helping Tyler slip through a service corridor. "My cousin was one of the fighters who transferred last year." In the control room overlooking the main arena, Mayor Rourke watched in disbelief as his carefully constructed operation disintegrated. Screens showed the incriminating footage being mirrored across multiple social media platforms despite his technical team's frantic efforts to shut down the feeds. "Damage control!" He barked into his phone, pacing frantically. "Call Judge Williams. Call Chief Peterson. This needs to be contained." But even as he issued commands, he could see the futility of his efforts. Dozens of phones throughout the arena were live streaming the events. Parents were being called. The exposure had reached critical mass. Meanwhile, Lena had made her way to the smaller secondary gym where she knew from her investigation that records were kept. Finding the door locked, she remembered Amara's lockpicking lesson from days earlier. With shaking hands, she managed to manipulate the simple lock. Inside, she found what she had been searching for: student files, medical records, and most crucially, recordings of Principal Stone threatening and bribing parents to cooperate with their children's transfers. Armed with this evidence, she slipped back toward the main arena, narrowly avoiding security patrols along the way. In a stroke of improvised brilliance, she connected her phone to the projection system in a classroom overlooking the training floor and began playing the recordings for a group of trapped students. "That's my brother's medical chart," she declared, her stutter completely gone as righteous anger replaced fear. They've been drugging him for 10 months to keep him compliant, while they forced him to fight for profit. The students began recording and streaming this new evidence immediately, the story spreading exponentially beyond the walls of the steel mill. Back on the main floor, Amara had climbed to the announcer's platform, commandeering the microphone. System. Her voice rang through the facility, cutting through the chaos. "We were called Jungle Kids," she declared, her words measured and powerful. "Tonight we walked through fire and danced." She surveyed the crowd, meeting eyes that had once looked at her with contempt, but now showed something closer to awe. This stops now. The exploitation, the fighting for others' entertainment, the trafficking of young people for profit. Several adults in expensive suits, Richard Klein's associates, tried to push toward an emergency exit, but found their path blocked by a line of wrestlers and football players who had clearly switched sides. Nobody leaves until the real police arrive, one linebacker announced, arms crossed over his massive chest. As if summoned by these words, sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. But they weren't the local police that Mayor Rourke controlled. These were state troopers and FBI agents, responding to the evidence that had been streaming from the facility for the past 30 minutes. Mayor Rourke smashed computer equipment in a futile attempt to destroy evidence, but it was too late. The truth had escaped containment. When law enforcement breached the main doors, they found hundreds of witnesses eager to provide statements about what they had seen. Through the chaos of arrests and testimony, the twins moved quietly, helping Damon and other drugged fighters to medical personnel who had arrived with the authorities. Their mission accomplished, they had no desire to remain at the center of attention. "We should go," Ao murmured to his sister as reporters began flooding into the facility. Amara nodded, taking one last look at the scene. Connor was being loaded onto a stretcher, still unconscious but stable. Principal Stone sat handcuffed beside a police cruiser, his face ashen. Richard Klein and his associates were being photographed and fingerprinted by FBI agents specifically tasked with investigating human trafficking, and throughout it all, students who had once been silent bystanders or active participants in the bullying were now speaking up, sharing stories, standing together against what had been happening beneath their school. Hand in hand, the twins slipped away through a service entrance, their silhouettes briefly outlined against the flashing lights of police vehicles before disappearing into the darkness. They had accomplished what they came to do. At home, Mama Moyo sat on the porch swing, a single candle burning beside her as she looked toward the horizon where emergency lights pulsed against the night sky. She didn't need to see the events to know what had transpired. She felt it in her heart, in the bones of her ancestors. When her children emerged from the shadows moving silently up the walkway, she simply opened her arms. No words were needed as they sat beside her, watching the sunrise together. 3 figures silhouetted against the growing light, breathing in unison as a new day dawned over Eastville. 3 months passed like a dream, the spring fading into a summer that buzzed with change and renewal. The story of Eastville's underground fighting ring had exploded across national media, triggering investigations in several other small towns where similar operations were suspected. Teen siblings expose underground fighting ring dominated headlines for weeks, though the twins themselves had refused all interview requests, preferring to let their actions speak for themselves. On a warm June morning, the Eastville High graduation ceremony took place on the football field, the mood markedly different from previous years. With Mayor Rourke awaiting trial and an interim administration working to rebuild the town's reputation, there was a palpable sense of both healing and reckoning in the air. As valedictorian, a position she had earned through quiet academic excellence that had gone largely unnoticed amid the social hierarchy of the old regime, Amara stood at the podium, looking out over a sea of faces that had transformed from hostile to respectful over the course of a single tumultuous year. "When my brother and I arrived in Eastville," she began, her voice clear in the morning air, "we were labeled before we were known, categorized before we were understood." She paused, her eyes finding Mama Moyo in the audience, sitting proudly, beside Lena's parents. "We didn't ask to fight," Amara continued, "but we refused to be silent. That's the choice each of us faces every day, to accept what is comfortable or to stand for what is right. The crowd listened in rapt attention as she spoke words that seemed beyond her years, but were, in truth, the distilled wisdom of generations before her. Today we graduate not just from high school, but from the illusion that silence protects us. It doesn't. Only truth does that. When she finished speaking, the audience rose in a standing ovation, not just for her words, but for the transformation they had witnessed in their community. Even those who had initially resented the disruption of the status quo had come to recognize that the twins had freed the town from a cancer growing at its core. By mid-July, Ayo had converted a vacant storefront downtown into a community martial arts school. With startup funding from an anonymous donor, widely suspected to be Judge Williams, Tyler's father, who had been horrified to learn how close to the corruption he had been, the dojo quickly became a gathering place for young people seeking both physical training and spiritual grounding. "We don't train to fight. We train to prevent fighting," Ayo explained to his first class of students, a diverse group that included former bullies alongside those who had been bullied. "The strongest person in any confrontation is the one who maintains control." The philosophy resonated in a community still healing from the revelation that their leaders had exploited their children. Parents who had once viewed the twins with suspicion now sought their guidance, recognizing that the discipline and values they embodied were exactly what Eastville needed. Lena's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable of all. The shy, stuttering girl who had first approached Amara in the library was now preparing to attend Columbia University on a full journalism scholarship. Her exposé on the fighting ring, published in the school newspaper and later picked up by national outlets, had caught the attention of the admission committee. "I'm dedicating my thesis to my brother and to the voices that nearly disappeared," she told the twins during a celebration dinner at their home. "Someone needs to tell these stories." Damon sat beside her, still recovering from the long-term effects of the drugs that had been used to control him. His progress was steady but challenging, some days clear and focused, others clouded by flashbacks and confusion. But with proper medical treatment and the unwavering support of his family, he was reclaiming pieces of himself day by day. "I remember moments in the ring with you," he told Amara, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "When you spoke the chant, it was like a light cutting through fog." The full extent of the operation's reach continued to unfold through ongoing investigations. Connor's father, Mayor Rourke, faced multiple federal charges related to human trafficking, forced labor, and corruption. The investigation had expanded to include similar operations in neighboring states, all connected to the same underground fighting circuit that Richard Klein represented. Connor himself experienced a dramatic fall from grace, expelled from Eastville High, and charged as a juvenile accomplice. He now sat in a county detention center awaiting sentencing. The evidence against him was overwhelming, not just his participation in the fighting ring, but his active role in intimidating and recruiting other students. In a small, sterile visitation room, Connor watched a recording of Ayo's graduation speech on the small TV mounted to the wall. His expression was unreadable, his eyes hollow with something that might have been regret, or perhaps simply the withdrawal from the performance-enhancing drugs that had fueled his aggression for so long. The downfall extended beyond the Rourke family. Principal Stone had turned state's evidence, providing details about how the operation had begun and expanded over the years. His testimony implicated numerous local officials and business leaders who had invested in or profited from the trafficking of young fighters. As summer progressed, Eastville began the slow process of rebuilding its leadership and reputation. A special election was scheduled for the fall to replace Mayor Rourke. Among the candidates was Mrs. Henderson, the school librarian who had maintained the bulletin board of transferred students that Ayo had discovered months earlier. Her small act of resistance now recognized as one of the few institutional attempts to acknowledge the disappearances. For Mama Moyo, the vindication of her children's actions brought both pride and purpose. Drawing on her extensive knowledge of traditional healing practices, she opened a cultural center in a small house near the town square. There, she offered classes in meditation, herbal medicine, and the wisdom traditions of her homeland. "In my country," she explained to a group of curious townspeople during an open house, "we believe that healing happens in community, not in isolation. The drum calls us together so that we might remember who we are. The talking drum that had once sat quietly in the twins' bedroom now occupied a place of honor in the center's main room. Children and adults alike were drawn to its presence, asking questions about its origins and meaning, eager to understand the culture that had produced such extraordinary young people. Tyler, whose secret documentation had provided the evidence needed to bring down the fighting ring, found his own path forward. Initially ostracized by those who saw him as a traitor to his social class, he eventually earned respect for his courage in standing against corruption despite personal risk. Courage, he told a group of middle schoolers during a community forum, on bullying, is switching sides when it matters, even when it costs you something. He had decided to defer college for a year, instead working as Ayo's assistant instructor at the dojo. The experience of teaching younger children the principles of respect and discipline was healing the damage done by years of complicity in Connor's bullying regime. As August approached, new students began arriving at Ayo's dojo daily, some seeking self-defense skills, others drawn by the philosophy he taught. The diversity of faces was striking. Former enemies training side by side, children of privilege working alongside those from Eastville's most neglected neighborhoods. "Why did you open this place here?" asked a newcomer, a boy who had once laughed at Connor's banana peel joke during the twins' first week at school. "After everything that happened, you could have just left." Ayo considered the question thoughtfully as he adjusted the boy's stance. "Leaving doesn't change things," he replied. "Staying and building something new, that's how transformation happens." The dojo had become more than just a martial arts school. It was a symbol of what Eastville could become, a community where strength meant protection rather than exploitation, where discipline channeled energy toward growth rather than destruction. On the last evening of summer, as golden light bathed the town in a warm glow, Ayo and Amara met at the abandoned warehouse where they had trained in secret months earlier. The space held memories of fear and determination, of plans made and risks taken. "Should we keep it?" Amara asked, running her hand along a wall where they had mounted makeshift training equipment. "As a reminder?" Ayo smiled, shaking his head. "We don't need reminders of the fight. We need spaces for what comes after." They had discussed converting the warehouse into an expansion of their community programs, perhaps a center for arts and athletics, where young people could explore their talents without the pressure of competition. The plans were still taking shape, but the intention was clear: to build rather than merely oppose. As twilight deepened around them, the twins moved to the center of the warehouse floor. Without words, they assumed their training positions, facing each other as they had countless times throughout their lives. They donned blindfolds, a training technique their father had taught them to sharpen awareness beyond visual cues. What followed was not the tense, determined practice of months earlier when they were preparing for confrontation. This was something more joyful, a dance of harmony and balance, each movement flowing into the next with natural grace. Their synchronized kata demonstrated years of training, yes, but also the deeper connection that had sustained them through every challenge. They moved as mirror images, yet each maintained their distinct essence: Amara's fierce precision, Ayo's grounded power. When they finally removed their blindfolds, perspiration glistening on their brows, they looked at each other, and for the first time in months laughed with pure, unburdened delight. The sound echoed through the empty warehouse, transforming the space just as they had transformed Eastville, not by force, but by authentic presence. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky as they walked home together, their shadows stretching long behind them. The path ahead was not without challenges. There would always be new battles, new tests of their principles. But they walked with the confidence of those who had discovered their purpose and the courage to live it fully. Eastville had called them jungle kids, intending to diminish and other them. Instead, the twins had shown the town what true strength looked like. Not dominance over others, but mastery of oneself. Not inflicting pain, but healing it. Not silencing truth, but amplifying it until it could no longer be ignored. As they reached their front porch where Mama Moyo waited with cups of ginger tea, They knew that the legacy they were building was larger than their personal vindication. It was about creating spaces where others could discover their own power and purpose. "The ancestors are pleased," Mama Moyo said softly, as they sat together on the porch swing, watching nightfall blanket their adopted hometown. "You have honored your father's teaching. You have brought light into darkness." The twins smiled, shoulders touching as they sipped their tea in comfortable silence. Tomorrow would bring new students to the dojo, new challenges to face, new opportunities to build rather than break. But tonight, in this moment of quiet connection, they were simply Ayo and Amara, brother and sister, fighters and healers, exactly who they were meant to be. Their story had started with isolation and prejudice but was ending with community and understanding. Not an ending at all, really, but a beginning, for themselves and for a town learning to see with new eyes. Have you ever wondered what incredible strengths lie dormant in those we choose to underestimate? Perhaps the quiet ones among us aren't hiding weakness, but mastering power beyond our imagination. Like and subscribe for more stories that reveal the extraordinary hidden beneath the ordinary.